Who doesn't love Waggoner Guide? Anybody in here haven't heard of the Waggoner Guide? Nope, nobody. It's an amazing document, obviously, that all boaters have. We always have a couple of them, always keep last year's close by and this year's. And they've been a huge supporter of RBAW through the years. We've done sessions together on the boat show live and Zooms they've had, as well as just shared information amongst the organizations. And Leonard and I were talking when they got here this morning, is there's even more we could do. So we have some more work to do between the two groups. But I've asked them to present today, because who doesn't love to hear from Waggoner Guide, and talk a little bit about, it's been a crazy last couple of years, right? Lots is changing with boating just because of boating in the world we live in. COVID had some things happen with some marinas that maybe aren't there anymore. And so they put together a great presentation on just what's going on and some opinions they have and what they've seen out there. So with that, I would like to hand it over to Lorena and Leonard Landon.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andrea. And you had titled our presentation, which I like the title on it. That's the State of the Union. So first of all, what's the Union? And the Union really for us and the Waggoner Guide is the Washington waters and the BC waters all the way up in the Southeast Alaska. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's changed on that one. If we get the slides up here, they're ready. As soon as we're ready with. So a lot of stuff has changed here. While we're getting the slides up here, we'll just go ahead on this. And we also in the change, we want to talk about the challenges that have changed. And Bob talked about that earlier too, and we agree with that. A lot has changed. We want to talk about the things that are the slides up.
Yeah, these are the slides. You were going to use your notes to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, just checking. So the things that have changed today's challenges have changed. These are the topics we want to go through. And we're talking about more than just the last 3 or 4 years. Of course, during COVID time, there were a lot of changes. One of the reasons that we titled this, Has Anything Changed? Is that we used to get that question at the boat show quite often at the Waggoner Guide booth. We don't get that quite as much for 2 reasons. One, because a lot of stuff has changed. And the other one was, after our work, we spent a year collecting updates for the Waggoner Guide, 528 pages, and literally every single page gets changed. And Lorena here would jump over the counter at that person that was implying that nothing had changed in that book. It's like to see some gymnastics. Come up to the booth. I would encourage you to give yourself a bottom arms like this from the counter and ask that question. Has anything changed in the book? So a lot has changed. The challenges for boating has changed. And
so we're going to talk about boats and boaters, what's happening with destinations, some tribal issues or interests, and how Washington waters are or are not accessible for foreign recreational boaters.
So this goes back, take yourself back a number of years, because I know a lot of us here have been boating for a long time. So again, the change that's happened back 30 years ago or more, when we were first cruising, one of the biggest challenges was before GPS and before moving map displays, it was, where are we? I think I'm here. And some of the reference points indicate this, but where are we? But those challenges are gone now. And so the challenges of where should we go, where are we now, are gone. And technology has really solved those. And our challenges today are the same kinds of things that Bob alluded to earlier. And that is that it's where can we go and what should we be doing and where shouldn't we be going and how fast or how slow we should be going. So those are many of our challenges today. And a part of the reason that those challenges come about is that we have a huge number of stakeholders in the waters. 30 years ago or 40 years ago, we had recreational boaters, we had commercial boaters, and we had some commercial fishermen, sport fishermen, and a few other agencies. But that number of agencies, the number of interested parties has grown dramatically. And the scrutiny has increased dramatically too. I just read an article about just out of Port Angeles. Apparently there are some acoustic samplers or acoustic gear out there. And that's to collect information about noise that's probably being created by boats. So that's just the point there is that we have a lot of scrutiny. We have AIS transponders on our boats now. And a number of people on shore are watching this through internet and through other avenues and binoculars, and just a lot of people are interested in this.
It used to be when we purchased our boat, we had to have all of the equipment, decide on the equipment, have that installed. Nowadays, we have what we call turnkey boats. They're all equipped with all the electronics, all of the gear, including kayaks and everything else. So we have a lot of new boaters that go out and really expect that you can just turn the key and take off and drive it like a car, and that's not always the case. We still need training. Bigger boats, that's also a trend nowadays. We're seeing bigger boats come along.
And a good example of the turnkey boats are Ranger tugs. We've all seen them out there, and they're to the credit of Ranger Tug, they did a beautiful job of creating a boat. And it's fully outfitted, everything from the kayak racks to the dinghy on the back, the electronics are all in there, and it literally is a turnkey boat. It's ready for people to go.
As a result, we still need on the water training and off the water training. There are a lot of new boaters out there. We can't assume they know the rules of the road. Numerous times we've had boats speed across our bow from the port side, not realizing that we were the stand-on vessel. So we need to be vigilant, and we still need some good training.
So one of the other trends that we're seeing back when we started boating a long time ago, it was 2-foot itis. It started with a 34 and you went to a 36, and maybe you made the big leap from 36 to 40. And quite literally, we have had more than one person that we talked to that went from a runabout, a cuddy cabin or a weekender type size boat, moved up to a 57-foot boat in one leap. And we see more and more of these larger vessels out there, if not the larger private vessels. And we're also seeing in this area, we're seeing a lot more of the super yachts coming here too. We were just up in the BC area, and we pulled into Dent Island, near Dent Island, and Fisherman's used to be Morgan's Landing, and that's been redone. It's gobs of docks in there. We pulled in with our 49-foot Defeaver, and we were the only boat there. And pretty soon these two mega yachts pulled in. They're both over 200 feet. One of them is named Moonstone. The other one is named Shadow. Shadow follows Moonstone, and the reason is that it's owned by two brothers, apparently. Both of them are. And the one boat is outfitted for people. The other boat, the Shadow, is over 200 feet, and it does nothing but carry all the toys. And our greatest entertainment was watching all the crew. The crew was just active the whole time. We had a great time there. But
Their dinghies were as large as our boat, so we were quite dwarfed.
the other sport fishing boat that they needed a shore power, and they were looking for 50-amp shore power for that. I'm kind of going, wow.
You want to talk about charts also.
Yeah, another thing that's changing in here, but for the good, and that is all the the NOAA charts, and we all know about the paper charts are going away, and also the raster version, the electronic version are going away, and that's moving along. NOAA really is happening, and if you've been following charts, many of the 184 charts here, the raster charts, are gone. They're canceled now. And BC, up in BC, the Canadian Hydrographics about a year ago announced that they're following that direction. It's probably going to take them a little bit longer because there are some areas where they just don't have the ENC charts as yet.
So with boaters visiting from other areas and new boaters, bareboat chartering continues to be popular, very popular. And it's interesting to note that actually the Northwest is the second largest charter base in the world, next to BVI. We have approximately 300 bareboat charters. And we do have some local charters listed in the 2023 Waggoner, so you can check that out, including Northwest Explorations. They're rather unique in that they lead flotillas with their boats, with their charters. Flotillas remain important and popular. They fill up quickly, including the Waggoner flotillas. And then rendezvous, not only by yacht clubs, but by folks who aren't necessarily yacht club members. They get together with folks of the same brand. So there's a group we need to reach out to. And then boat clubs, that's really exploded, especially with the young people. They don't have a lot of time. They want to go out for a week or maybe 2 weeks. And so instead of joining a yacht club, they join a boat club. And there's a membership fee and a monthly fee, which gives them access to a variety of boats. They also have social events. So again, this is a group we need to reach out to. One of the largest is Freedom Boat Club. They're nationwide. They have numerous locations in both Washington and British Columbia.
And that's a growing trend. There's, we just noticed the up in BC, there's a brand new one that started up, YOLO, is it YOLO? YOLO club is just started. They're just forming right now and very popular.
Carefree Boat Club, YOLO, Freedom Boat Club, and Fun Share Boat Club.
Freedom Boat Club is an RBAW contributing member, since we care about recreation boat.
So we talked about the challenges right now, and the challenges for boaters come from, again, these stakeholders, government regulations, many agencies, federal, state, BC area. There are just a growing number of agencies that are interested in that. We built environmental concerns. We're all aware of all the different environmental groups that are out there that are interested, wildlife topics that may be addressed. And as I mentioned earlier, the number of stakeholders in the waterways is just, it's mushrooms from where it was from many years ago. And that's not going to stop. There are probably going to be more and more stakeholders in the waters out there.
So it's fun to talk about the destinations, but more importantly now, we need to talk about where boats cannot go.
And a good example of where boats can't go, this is up in the BC area, and it's a sanctuary, interim sanctuary zone areas in the Gulf Islands. And this was for the southern resident killer whales. This came in about 3 years ago. And I guess the surprising one is that there are still boats that are busting into this area and getting hailed by the Canadian Coast Guard. There's fines of $1,000, and they've also been threats of imprisonment on this one as well. It's a very serious one. And one of them happens to be on the southwest side of North Pender Island, and that's the one that people are busting most. And it's because it's just northwest of Bedwell Harbor, which is everybody's accustomed to going through customs there, and then charging right up the west side of North Pender Island. There was a post. This was an interesting one. There was a post on the social media on this boater was talking about how they this past summer were within a small private flotilla group of 3 boats, and they happened to be the only boat that was transmitting AIS, and they were hailed by Coast Guard because they were intruding in this sanctuary zone. And the voter on the social media suggested that maybe the solution should be turn off your AIS when you're there. And luckily, a lot of the AIS of the posts on the social media were correct in saying, no, the solution is look at your charts, read the charts. Both these interim sanctuary areas are posted there on the charts. They've been there for 2 to 3 years and posted as restricted areas. Another one is the voluntary no-go zone off of San Juan Island. This one's been there for a number of years as well, and it's voluntary. Another area that we shouldn't go into right now. And then the whale, the orca and the southern resident killer whale issues that we need to be aware of on the distancing. And Bob talked about earlier about how those distances are probably going to change again, or at least there's some legislation moving in that direction. We're in full support of that. We're also in support of the idea that we need some more tools as boaters out there. The distances right now, the 300, 400 yards, it's pretty tough. I mean, we have occasionally come on. Well, this happened in San Juan Island. We were between San Juan and Lopez, and we were motoring down through there, and then happened to notice what looked like a commercial whale watching boat. And that was our first clue that there really were some whales around there. That gave us an alert that we started looking at. Ah, there is one, and we altered our course. But the tools, get us some more tools that help us find the whales, because many of us, I think, cruisers and boaters, most of us really are going from point A to point B. If we happen to see a whale along the way, that's fine. We're not out there to look for whales. And so if we had some more tools, that would be wonderful. One of the things we're doing in Waggoner from 40 years ago or 30 years ago. By the way, I'm picking that number because our 30th anniversary edition of the Waggoner Guide comes out in the 2024 edition. So we're already thinking about that one. It's top of mind. So that's why I picked that number. But 30 or 40 years ago, we could go anywhere that we wanted to. And one of the issues right now has to do with the eelgrass. And one of the things that we're doing right now with the Waggoner Guide, besides just telling people where they might go and how much fun they would have boating, is advocacy about things like the restrictions on whales and how to boat responsibly. And that's a big thing that we're taking up right now. And eelgrass is one of those. Anchoring and staying out of eelgrass. A number of the organizations that are out there that are supporting the eelgrass and helping with that have come out with some maps that are depicting locations for eelgrass. Unfortunately, for boaters, we've tried to use those, but they're at a scale that is absolutely impossible to use them for anchoring. They do not have nearly enough detail to figure out where you should or should not anchor. So we started adding these about 3 years ago with the help from Washington State DNR and their mapping data for eelgrass. We now have that on the maps. And you'll see this annotated here, and we shade in the area where the eelgrass is located on maps in anchorage areas. If we don't have a map for the anchorage area, if we just have text, well, in the text, we'll tell you the shallowest and the deepest areas where the known eelgrass is located, with the idea that you can go find deeper water and anchor outside of the eelgrass areas.
There are also speed limit zones and no wake zones, which are not on your charts. And so we as Waggoner have indicated those on our charts. In an example here, 6 knots.
Exactly. Oh, I got
Yeah,
my slides out of order.
Yeah.
She's the organized one. I've always said that we're a synergistic team. We work together. I put the typos in and she takes it out.
The next slide here, we have a full list. You can see there's quite a few of these feed zones that boaters are not aware of, again, because they're not on the chart. So we have those listed in the Waggoner Guide. And Leonard already talked about the eelgrass and marinas. Less is more, yeah.
So here's the changes, the things that have changed and the things that are happening in the marina world. And it has to do with destinations and the increasing number of boaters. We talked about how there are more and more boats and boaters out there, and they all want to go somewhere. Now, we all want to go to a destination with our boats. Unfortunately, the number of marinas is at best, it's the same. And actually, we've lost a number of destinations already. We're going to list some of those. And then the marine parks also, their capacity is about the same. If anything, we may have lost some mooring buoys and other things. So at best, we have the same number of destinations. We need more. The destinations, at the recreational boating area and the whole area, we need to create more and more destinations. And we also need to increase the capacity at many of the destinations that we have right now. We'll talk about some techniques for doing that, but there are probably twice as many boats and boaters out there as there were 20, 30 years ago, for sure.
Marinas are also discovering that there's more money in permanent moorage than guest moorage. So there again, we're losing some guest space.
Again, a change. This is one that happened BC area, kind of a contrast to where we have marinas. Marinas on the Washington side may not have accelerated as much as they should in terms of creating extra space. One of the things that is going on the bright spot is up in BC over the last 15, 20 years. The old red rail docks that used to be the Department of Fisheries docks up there. And over the, well, 10, more than 10 or 15 years ago, the federal, the DFO, the Department of Fisheries up there decided that they were not equipped to keep these docks up to standards and keep them maintained. And so they started just giving them to regional and municipalities up there. And you'll see a number of different names on these regional areas. And to their credit, they've done a beautiful job of keeping them up to date. The red rails are gone in most cases. But there are new docks, there's expanded dock facilities. They've gone from just accommodating the commercial fishing boats and fishermen into accommodating recreational fees. So again, something that BC has done that would be great if we could learn from that and do a little bit more.
Another challenge would be mooring buoys and making sure there's a relationship with the tribes. And recently at Cypress Island, 6 new mooring buoys were put in, and they had to take those out. Our understanding is because the permitting process did not address some tribal concerns, so.
And that was DNR buoys, mooring buoys.
Right.
So marinas, this is the list of the marinas that have closed. They're gone, and as you'll notice here, that's the Broughton's has been devastated almost. And part of this is an evolutionary process. Nearly all of these that went away were family-run marinas of some sort, and they aged out. I mean, people, the families are gone now, and so these have been some of them shut down. They, I think you had one Quatsi. What happened there?
Yes, Quatsi was purchased by Soyantua Lodge, a fishing lodge, and they're going to use the floats at Quatsi as like an outstation for their fishing guests.
And then Shawl Bay is one that went away about 5 or 6 years ago, and then it's been trying to come back again. A new owner bought that, and for the past 2 or 3 years that we've been checking with him, he keeps saying that, yeah, I'm going to fix it up, and we're going to have guest moorage. But we stopped by there, and it's clearly not ready for guest moorage at this point.
So again, as you read down the list, you can see that all of these are family run, and the trend now is corporate ownership.
And corporate includes tribal, by the way. Is this the one? Yeah. So Echo Bay, for instance, and Shearwater are both, they've been repurchased recently by tribal interests. There's a lot of money available up there now, and through the tribal organizations and the corporations.
So this is the list of new ownership marinas that have changed ownership or under new management. Of course, Lake Bay's on that list. Elliott Bay, April Point, Echo Bay, Shearwater, Victoria International, Loverick, Marina. And
Anybody been to Loverick? Oh, all right. So this is, we've been to Anacortes. Loverick is kind of halfway between the ferry terminal, Washington State Ferry Terminal, and downtown. Everybody remembers it's a commercial place. It's very active, but it looks like it's been there for 30 years or more. Wow.
I had heard that Victoria International had changed hands. Did they just misjudge the market up there? What happened there? The last time I was at Echo Bay, Pierre was trying to get me to buy the marina. They just said, I don't think so, but if you could expand on what happened there with the tribal, you said?
Victoria International is under receivership.
Okay, yeah.
So
Yeah.
beautiful marina.
Beautiful, yeah.
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 It's a
Very
business opportunity for Bob.
Yeah.
So where are we at here?
We have a list here of marinas that are being upgraded or rebuilt.
These are all good news, by the
Yeah,
way.
it's encouraging. It's a nice long list. So that's good news. And of course, there is funding available through the state, but as you know, it's very competitive to get grants. Des Moines is one. They're currently working on restructuring, and actually Waggoner consulted with them, consulting work.
Marina Consulting.
Marina Consulting, and gave them some recommendations, and so they're carrying through on that project.
And there's a message here from the earlier, that is one of the things we did at Des Moines, they have a lot, very, too many, small slips. And so as part of their restructuring, they're going to be cutting down the number of slips they have and increasing the number of larger slips. It goes back to that statement about destinations too, and the trends. The trends are for larger boats. Larger boats, of course, can't fit into many of the older, smaller slips. So again, capacity issues, and some of the marinas are affected by that when the bigger boats come in. If the marinas with guest moorage have side tie moorage, of course, the bigger boats are going to take more space and have fewer guests in there, accommodating fewer guests. So trends here.
Another trend, marinas, especially in BC, are asking for $2 million liability coverage, just even for guests, not just for permanent moorage, but for guests that come in, you need to show proof of liability. We found that using your umbrella insurance helps meet that requirement.
Here, there's a list of them here. Again, most of them are in BC. There's a few of them that don't state what the amount of liability, but whenever the amount is stated, it seems to be 2 million. We haven't quite figured out why that number shows up, but that's a trend, definitely a small trend that's happening up there. And it's usually with municipal marinas up there.
And they are noted in the Waggoner guide, so you can look that up. So some of the insurance, I think, has been because of derelict boats and boat spills, that's prompted the insurance.
Anchoring. So anchoring is always one of those special parts of boating. I smile because I love it. I always like pulling into a bay and drop the anchor and you say, this is my view for tonight. And it's wonderful. It's a unique part of boating, the ability to do that and drop the anchor somewhere. Good news is that for the vast majority of that's still true. You can still pull into a bay and pick your spot. And by the way, this is a small pet peeve that I'm sure is shared, and that is if you pull into a bay and there's somebody anchored over there, that's not the place to anchor. Over there is the place to anchor. Sometimes we pull into an anchor, just especially up north. And if you look at one of the Douglas books or the Waggoner guide, and it has a little anchor that says anchor there, that's exactly where everybody's anchored. I was always amused with that. So
Sometimes a boat will come up in front of you and drop their anchor right on top of yours. Yeah.
So these are some places that some changes that are happening. Matt's Bay has been there that way, been this way for a long time. Not very many people know this, but it's a private tidelands area, and it's owned and controlled by the Matt's Bay
Private aquatic lands.
private aquatic land, limited to 5-night stay, and it's managed by the homeowner association with homes that ring the whole bay. And so if you're there and if you spend 3 nights there, you'll probably get somebody roll out with their book with their rowboat and ask you how long you're going to be staying. So it's one of those unique places that you kind of really, is that true? And the other one, False Creek, is still as it has been for a few years. You need a permit to anchor there, and this was all prompted by derelict vessels that were accumulating in False Creek. It's a free permit. You get it from the city of Vancouver.
They just removed some derelict boats, by the way, out of False Creek, so that's good news.
So Port Moody, DAA, this is a Port Moody designated anchoring area. The Port of Vancouver is renamed, it's retitled itself. It's the Port of Vancouver and Fraser Rivers. And its jurisdiction now goes all the way down to Steveston on the Fraser River, and it goes all the way up into Indian Arm and over into Port Moody. And with that jurisdiction, again, they're addressing derelict vessels that are anchored out. And they're now establishing designated anchoring areas. Areas are where you only in those areas can you anchor. And Port Moody has been there for about 2 or 3 years. It's a rectangular area. You need a permit. You get the permit online. The kicker to it is that you pay $15 per night for the permit. And the really interesting kicker is you need to show evidence of $2 million worth of liability insurance. in order to anchor there. They just set up, I think this last year, they set up a designated anchor area in Deep Cove, Indian Arm, so partway up, a beautiful little village in there. And the interesting part is that because this is a defined term, the designated anchoring area within the jurisdiction, the designated anchoring area for Deep Cove has 4 mooring buoys in it. You can use the mooring buoys, but there's no anchoring anywhere in the designated anchoring area. So these are some of the changes that are happening. Again, this is a small trend right now. We don't see it going too far. Steveston, which used to be seasonal anchoring, no anchoring, I should say, is now no anchoring period. There's another one at Boat Harbor, which is Boat Harbor is on the North Vancouver shore side, just below Dodd Narrows, kind of between Dodd Narrows and Ladysmith. And this is an interesting one because it's also a new marina that's in there, the Boat Harbor Marina. And then just outside of the Boat Harbor, there was a nice anchoring area that was in quite a number of it used to be in the Waggoner ride for a while.
It's now considered a private water lot, so you do need prior permission before anchoring.
There's spar buoys throughout this bay that says no anchoring, and they have to permit there. Mooring buoys, again, the mooring buoys are great. We're an advocate of that, and we would echo the earlier comment about we'd love to see more mooring buoys. It's great that the state of Washington came in and renovated many of the park buoys and replaced most of them, not all of them. It would be lovely to see all of them come back. The other thing we would like to see would be a next program to go through and upgrade all of those and making them larger and accommodating larger vessels. So Department of Natural Resources, all of their buoys are rated for 50 feet, but there's no written limit on the size of vessels on the DNR buoys. We'd like to see something like that in the state of Washington where they get to upgrade them. The other one we understand, I've never been diving down there to check this, but according to my understanding, the DNR buoys have seabed friendly anchors to them. They're auger type anchors apparently, and they're set up so without chains that drag around and scour the back of the seabed. Our understanding is that state parks may not have done that yet. It would be great to see the state parks come up with a program like that.
And in BC, we might mention that the size for their buoys and rafting is all dependent on wind conditions, and they have instructions on the buoy depending on the strength of the wind. The weight or length of your boat is permitted.
It varies.
It varies.
Depending upon when. So as we mentioned, we'd like to see more destinations. And the marinas, if we could get more marinas, that would be great. But if the marinas can figure out how to accommodate more transient vessels, guest vessels, that would be great. One of the programs that works very well is hot berthing. Southeast Alaska totally depends on hot berthing up there for guest moorage. And Cap Sandy up in Anchorage does an excellent job of that. We'd like to see a more active program like that at many more of the marinas to make more guest moorage available at the marinas.
So when a permanent tenant is out, then they'll use that space for guest moorage, cold berthing.
Cap Sandy, for instance, they routinely are reporting more guest nights than they have guest moorage slips, and that's all through hot berthing.
And as mentioned earlier, stern ties would be fabulous. We would love to see a stern tie program in Washington State. You're probably familiar with BC Marine Parks Forever Society. They're very similar to RBAW. They purchase property for marine parks, and they also have a very active stern tie program. They put in 168 stern ties, and they hope to put in 12 more here in the near future. We'll touch quickly on some First Nations. This is very important topic to British Columbia. On this map, we see.
I was just going to say the important. We discovered how important this is on our this last season. We stopped and spent a fair bit of time in Clemtu. and also in Shearwater, near Shearwater, Bella Bella. And there were several tribal organizations and representatives that approached us, and they really had an appeal about how they would like to see recreational boaters have a better awareness of the tribal lands and of tribal issues.
Well, only 6% of the population is First Nation. I was surprised to learn that
In BC,
in BC, that 95% of BC lands are on unceded traditional First Nations territories. So they never handed over to the Crown or to Canada their lands. And again, they really appreciate voters understanding this, knowing something about their culture, knowing what lands they're on, knowing how to pronounce some of the names. It's all part of the reconciliation program in BC. And as a result, of course, there have been some name changes. Queen Charlotte Islands, we know, is now called Haida Gwaii. The southern half is called Gwaii-Haanes. It's a national park reserve. The island to the south, further south, is Thangway. And just recently, Queen Charlotte City is now called Dying-Geese. And in the Gulf Islands, Cooper Island is now Penellicut Island, Newcastle is Section. And Strait of Georgia, Sandy Island is Yayampuaw. And Sunshine Coast, Indian Arm Park is now Saynuz Kwayam. And here in Washington State on Kitket Island, the preserve there is called Kukatali Island or Kukitali. Kukitali Reserve.
notice I didn't even try.
Indian translator.
Also, the trend in BC is for watchman programs, both ancient villages and bear viewing preserves. And Gwaii-Haanes, of course, we know there's 5 historic village sites. You do need a permit and orientation to visit Gwaii-Haanes, and voters are to radio the watchman before going ashore. Recently, Village Island in the Broughtons, that's now under watchman program during the summer months. You do need prior permission to go ashore any time of year, and you're to contact the Mamalakula First Nation Band Office before visiting the island. And just recently in Banfield, on the west side of Vancouver Island, the Puyahat First Nation, they provide tours of the nearby Kian village, again, another traditional First Nations older village. Hot Springs Cove, Maquina Marine Provincial Park on west side Vancouver Island. That's co-managed by the BC Parks and the Hausat First Nations. There's a fee to tie up to the dock, hike the boardwalk trail, and use the hot springs. The Hausat, there's a trend there. They are asking donations when you anchor in their traditional waters. So again, it's a donation, but that is a trend on the west side of Vancouver Island.
And by the way, the one thing, the one place that's left that we know of that's still closed as a result of still out of COVID time is near Hot Springs of the Hesquiat Park, which is out where Cougar Annie's Park or Cougar Annie's Garden is located, and the bay in there, and that whole bay area is still closed from the park area is still closed right now. No signs of it opening yet.
There are some grizzly bear viewing preserves that are under tribal watchman programs. One is Glendale Cove and Knight Inlet in the Broughtons. Both recreational and commercial boats visit here, and voters are to contact the Glendale Cove Guardians by radio. Bear viewing is from your boat, no going ashore.
This one's in the Broughtons on Knight Inlet.
Right. And then northern BC, north of Cape Caution, there are 2 brand new grizzly bear viewing sites or conservancy areas. They're under the Guardian Watchman program of the Kitasoo Guardians. They're based out of Plimtu. And one is at Poison Cove and Muscle River, which is inside the Fjordland region. The other one is located in Coots Inlet off of Grand Reach, south of Butedale. Again, boaters are to contact the Kittasu Guardian Fire Radio. And viewing again is from your vessel only and no going ashore. All of these details and more are in the Waggoner cruising guide, so you can check that out.
I think only in the next year, 20.
Yeah, 2023.
Yeah, so that information that you have in Waggoner Guide, is that consolidated or is that by each individual?
By area,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, by area. And so the message here is that First Nations and Native Americans, they all appreciate us as voters learning more about the Native history and the Native populations. They also appreciate us being respectful of the bear viewing conservancies. If there are too many boats in there, it does displace bears.
Good question, Lorena, from the Zoom, this area you're going through now, is this all in one section of the new Waggoner guide, or is it in each specific location?
You'll
area?
find the map in the compendium.
Okay,
Overview of how to go boating in the Northwest. And then in the cruising areas, you'll find the specific information for the
For that
Washington
area.
programs for that area.
thank you.
So I want to talk a little about the accessibility to Washington waters here. And we'd like to make sure that we keep the barriers down to foreign vessels that are flagged, not US flagged. And this is Canadian as well as non-Canadian or other than Canadian vessels too. Cruising permits, there's a lot of confusion about cruising permits. They're wonderful, they're great. The federal government, CBP, did a great job in facilitating that and removing barriers to Canadian vessels as well as foreign vessels. And so boaters come in, foreign flagged vessels get a cruising license, and once they get a cruising license, they do not have to report their different movement within the Puget Sound area, because Puget Sound is defined as one port. CBP is defined as one destination, and the foreign vessels, Canadian included, do not need to report when they move from Seattle to Tacoma to all these different places. However, in Southeast Alaska, that's not the case. They are independent ports up there. So with a cruising license, the Canadian vessel going in there clears in, gets their customs, their cruising permit. And then once they move from Ketchikan to Wrangell, for instance, they need to report in at Wrangell to CBP. And they need to report in again when they go to Juneau, for instance. So every movement, it would be great if we can remove some of that kind of a barrier. Here in Washington, we've got another small barrier for Canadian, well, all foreign boats or any boat that does not have a Washington State registration sticker. And it's the AIS Aquatic Invasive Species permit that's required. You need to buy this. It's a 1-year permit, and it's all about funding. State will tell you that it's just about getting money for the Aquatic Invasive Species department and the people that are running that, which, by the way, we're all in favor of that. As the green crab issue, for instance, that's going on right now, we really need aquatic invasive species protection, make sure there's an agency there. It's just that it would be great if we could figure out a way to get funding that, other than requiring voters to buy this permit and on an annual basis. The other big one that we're on a committee, we're on the Puget Sound pilotage committee as for the vessel exemption committee. And I don't know if everybody's aware, but with a Washington RCW law that's in place today, that was put in place almost 100 years ago, every foreign flagged vessel other than Canadian needs to have a pilot on board when it's in Puget Sound or in Grace Harbor.
No
Period.
matter what size.
Well, it could be a 30-foot sailing vessel, and they have to have a pilot on board. Except unless that the operator and that vessel have an exemption from the pilotage board. Now, and for vessels that are 50 feet and under, you can apply for a permit for an exemption. It's $50 for the exemption to apply for the exemption. And if you get the exemption, then you don't need to have a pilot on board. Then that's okay. $50 is probably okay. I don't know. There should probably be a cutoff on the size of the vessel or tonnage in terms of a requirement for pilot and or exemption. Back on the exemption, if your boat happens to be 51 feet, the fee for applying for an exemption goes from $50 to $1,500. So some fair weather, some nice, boat coming out of somebody that came across the Pacific or something on their sailing vessel and happens to be 51 feet. And they have to apply for this permit 30 days before arriving, and they need to pay this fee in by check. No electronic payment. It needs to be by check drawn on a US bank. Well, it's kind of, we just put a bunch of little barriers up, and if we could, we're working on that, but it's going to take an RCW change. Because right now RCW says every foreign flag vessel. So keeping barriers down, we want to get foreign vessels in here.
Have you heard any activity in Canada that would have a reciprocal AIS permit requirement for us to go to Canada? Has that been raised yet?
With the aquatic invasive species.
Yes.
And
Are the Canadians thinking about asking us to pay a similar?
No, we haven't heard anything about that, but and as a matter of fact, I asked that question. This is about 3 years ago that this came into place. Or 4, okay, 5, I guess. And so I did ask about that, and the reciprocity between BC and Washington is the issue. And I never did get a definitive answer on that one. I know the question, and the issue becomes, are they going to require that we do that going north or for US boats? And I don't believe it's an issue. I don't believe they're asking us to buy that permit. And I don't believe anybody's addressed the reciprocity issue. I do remember asking, because if in the US, if another state has a program like this and the boat comes in, then there's a reciprocity on that, and they don't have to get an AIS permit, I believe, for Washington. But it's only state to state, and the issue is still BC.
So in closing, here's some fun slides we wanted to share. Not all wildlife apparently adhere to the distance rule. These are stellar lions. They can weigh from 580 to 1,200 pounds. And this poor sailboat you can see is just about being sunk by these guys who came to visit.
And this next one came to us from one of our field correspondents. It's a group of people, volunteers, that help us keep the information up to date. This comes from Sitka, and they live aboard up there. This was titled "The Hazard of Tying Up Your Boat, your bicycle at high tide." And my second thought was that bike would look even worse if it were at low tide. So, action items. So we talked about some things that have changed and the changes that we would like to see in here. And one of the things there's a lot of forces out there, the different stakeholders in the water, and Bob alluded to some of this too, and that is there's forces out there, lots of interest in the waterways out there, and we as the recreational boaters, we need to make sure we're speaking together out of this whole thing, because it needs a loud voice, as evidenced by the excise tax, and it needed a loud voice. And we're here as Waggoner Guide. We think we do a pretty good job of communicating, and we're available. If you have anything you want to communicate, get it to us. We will help. We'll do whatever we can to get that word out, because we believe it needs a really, really loud voice nowadays.
We're happy to act as a conduit through our e-news that reaches our subscribers. And if there's anything you want to send us, please do so. Great.
And it's back to this advocacy thing too. We're all about responsible and sustainable recreational boating right now. So if for instance, protecting eelgrass, protecting things, we're all for that. We just want to make sure we're doing it in the way, and the tools are there for us to do that as recreational boaters. So. And
thank you for the opportunity to be with you all.
Thank you.
thank you.